الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وترى الشمس إذا طلعت تزاور عن كهفهم ذات اليمين وإذا غربت تقرضهم ذات الشمال وهم في فجوة منه ذلك من آيات الله من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وتحسبهم أيقاظا وهم رقود ونقلبهم ذات اليمين وذات الشمال وكلبهم باسط ذراعيه بالوصيد لو اطلعت عليهم لوليت منهم فرارا ولملئت منهم رعبا صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. My dear respected brothers, elders, listeners, the verses of the Holy Quran that I've recited are from the second ruku of Surah Al-Kahf in para 15, and the last verse of the second ruku and the first verse of the third ruku which I have recited. In the previous verses we had heard where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned about the people of the cave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began in the second ruku with mentioning نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ, that we narrate to you the story with the truth. And also is being discussed at the beginning of this surah. The Quran is not a history book. Their names, where they are buried, how many of them were there, and which place they are in, which city. These discussions have not been mentioned in the Quran, and as the Mufassirin rahimahullah mentioned, like Ibn Kathir, Mufti Shafi Sahib in his Tafsir book, they've mentioned to know all this detail is a discussion of the Mu'arrikhin, those that have interest in history. But to know this knowledge, if one does not know this, it will not effect of understanding the lessons from these verses or the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us. Now, in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned 3 states of the people of the cave, which is unique, which is a miracle. When a miracle is performed on the hand of a prophet of Allah, then this is called a mu'jizah. And when this miracle is performed on a hand of a non-prophet, then this is called a karama. Now, from the people of the cave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned 3 states about them which is unusual. And as I've mentioned in the previous dars and the one before that, there are many lessons for the youth to learn. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned إِذْ أَوَى الْفِتْيَةِ إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. In this surah we have on 2 occasions where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has addressed and mentioned that they were youngsters, they were young. So there are many lessons we learn or we can learn the youngsters. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had kept them alive and they were sleeping in this cave without any food, without any drink, and they still remained alive. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He had protected their bodies. How did He protect them? One thing that has been mentioned is about the sun. وَتَرَى الشَّمْسَ إِذَا طَلَعَتْ تَزَاوَرُوا عَنْ كَهْفِهِمْ ذَاتَ الْيَمِينِ. And if you were to visualize this, if you were to look and if you were present at that moment outside the cave, then you would see the sun. When it rose, then what would happen? تَزَاوَرُوا عَنْ كَهْفِهِمْ. It would incline from their cave to the right side. وَإِذَا غَرَبَتْ تَقْرِضُهُمْ ذَاتَ الشِّمَالِ وَهُمْ فِي فَجْوَةٍ مِّنْ. And when the sun would set and come down, then it would cut away from them on the left hand side. وَهُمْ فِي فَجْوَةٍ. Fajwa means between them they were in the middle. Between this, they were in the middle. Now, for the people of the cave, there was no direct sunlight, but there was a reflection of the sun. The Mufassirin have given different reasonings. One could be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had changed the direction of the sun so their bodies and clothes are protected. And the reflection of the sun was there because it'd be chilly, it'd be cold and windy, and they needed part of it. Or it could be so there's no exposure for the people that they know that they are in this cave. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But Allah is telling us, this did not happen itself. The people of the cave did not do this. This whole system of the sun changing for them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, ذَلِكَ مِنْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ. This is from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His power, His qudrah. For they went in this cave to protect their iman. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to protect their body, He changed the movement of the sun. مَنْ يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَهُوَ الْمُهْتَدِ. Whoever Allah guides, indeed for him is total guidance. وَمَنْ يُضْلِلْ. And whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala misguides and put astray, فَلَنْ تَجِدَ لَهُ وَلِيًّا مُرْشِدًا. Then you will not find any protector or any guide that can put him on the right path. This is the first point from the 3 states which was unusual. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them. Point number 2. وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ. If you was to visualize this and if you was to see them in this cave, then you would think they are awake. وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ. Yet they were asleep. So when a person sleeps, they are in deep sleep. Then the breathing, as we know, changes. The eyes are closed and they are totally relaxed. Someone come and attack them, harm them, they may not know they are in deep sleep. But this sleep was unusual. Yet they slept for hundreds of years. But if you was to see them, you would think that they are awake. The Mufassirin write, the eyes were open. And the style of breathing in the sleep was not present. And also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala further mentions, وَنُقَلِّبُهُمْ ذَاتَ الْيَمِينِ وَذَاتَ الشِّمَالِ. Not only that they were totally relaxed while they were sleeping for this long, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that we would turn them from the right side to the left side. This movement was taking place. So if someone was to come in this cave, they would be fearful that they are awake and they could not harm them. Another meaning the Mufassirin mentioned is to protect their body, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moved them where they would turn to the right and then they would turn to the left also. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about their dog. وَكَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَاعَيْهِ بِالْوَصِيدِ. Now their dog had stretched his forearms at the mouth of this cave. So a person that would try to look inside could only see the front and would not know what is there and would become fearful. Now we come on to the point of this dog. There are many narrations that we find in the books of hadith. Firstly, a question may come into mind that there was a dog who was with them. When we know from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that if one has a dog, then the angels of mercy do not come to such a house. Then on the other hand, we have another hadith recorded by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah in his Sahih. That person that has a dog, there are only some grounds which Sharia has given permissibility for one to own a dog. Number one is for hunting, and number two is to protect livestock. But one that keeps a dog just as a pet is not allowed in Islam, is haram, is forbidden. And we are reducing 200 qirats of reward in our account every day. Now as a Muslim, we are so weak in our iman, in our a'mal, in our remembering Allah and staying away from sin. We are weak as it is, and if one owns a dog on a daily basis, how much reward are they losing? And we see it's becoming very common within the youth to own dogs as a pet. So there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are depriving the angels of mercy to enter our homes. And how much reward are we losing on it every day? Yet we are so weak as it is. But this dog was special. Why did one of them have this dog? The Mufassirin have given one reason. It could have been for hunting. Number two, the reason could be that it was to protect livestock. And as we know, dogs, they are very faithful to their owners. And when they tried to remove and push this dog away while they were going, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given this dog the power to speak. And the dog has said, no, that I would like to follow and be with the pious people. So this is one of the reasons, or one reason that the Mufassirin mentioned is that just like in other Sharias, there were certain things that were lawful and allowed. This was one possibility. So now this dog had also gone with them in this cave, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had used this as a means to protect them. وَكَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَاعَيْهِ بِالْوَصِيدِ. So now this dog also joined them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made it a means that this dog now protected them. So this is, after listening to these ahadith, it's important we understand, the youth, that to keep dogs as a pet, or to keep them, we are losing a lot of reward. We are displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there's all the issue of purity and tahara. And then we are weak as it is for prayer. Then what will happen to our iman? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala further mentions, لَوِ اطَّلَعْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ لَوَلَّيْتَ مِنْهُمْ فِرَارًا وَلَمُلِئْتَ مِنْهُمْ رُعْبًا. So this unique style that the Quran has mentioned, that we cannot imagine. They're sleeping, and they've slept for hundreds of years. But if you was to look at them, you would think that they are awake. And Allah kept this dog at the mouth of this cave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions to His beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and a message for the people to come after, if you was to look at them, then what would happen? You would run because you would become fearful. and you would be filled with fear if you was to look at them. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had protected them. The third state which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned unusual about them, وَكَذَلِكَ بَعَثْنَاهُمْ. And like this, if we look in the first ruku, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, فَضَرَبْنَا عَلَىٰ آذَانِهِمْ فِي الْكَهْفِ سِنِينَ عَدَدًا. When one goes to sleep, the two means that we have when we listen and we also speak. So when one goes to sleep, then what happens? The ears will go to sleep first, then the eyes. And when we wake up, the ears first, and then the eyes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put a stop to their hearing. Now after hundreds of years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them life. This is the boost for our iman. Hundreds of years without any food, without any drink, without any vitamins. We are so weak, we cannot, without 1 month, survive without these basic vitamins, without water. How many days would we remain alive? They have slept for this long, hundreds of years, and now Allah has given them life again. Their clothing, their speech, their health is absolutely fit and they're perfect. This is the qudra and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لِيَتَسَاءَلُوا بَيْنَهُمْ. They began to speak and question one another and ask. قَالَ قَائِلٌ مِّنْهُمْ كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ. One of them said, how long have you stayed in this cave? They went in the morning, and at the time they had woke up, it was dark. So they assumed, قَالُوا لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. They said that we have stayed a full day or part of a day. When we get into a discussion, we do not stop discussing until we've had a good fight with one another for a long time. We are trying to prove someone else wrong. They're trying to prove how long did we stay, what happened, and so on. We discuss this for hours. But after they had this discussion, they said, end this debate. قَالُوا رَبُّكُمْ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثْتُمْ. That your Lord knows how long you have remained in this cave. How long we have stayed. End the discussion. Allahu Alam, Allah knows best. Now, it was time for them that they were hungry and they needed to eat food. فَبَعَثُوا أَحَدَكُمْ بِوَرِقِكُمْ هَذِهِ إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ. Now they had to send some of them to go out to get food. And if they all went, because they were thinking they've slept for 1 day or part of a day, yet they had slept for hundreds of years, that if they go out, all of them together, because it was known around that they are looking for these youngsters that have gone missing, then it would be trouble for them. So they had sent 2 of them to go, and they had some silver coins, which the Mufassirin, that is not against zuhad, it's not against taqwa, it's not against tawakkul, reliance on Allah, or being disattached from the dunya and the pleasures of the dunya to have some money. It's a means. They did not say that we will not touch any money, no coins, and we will totally rely on Allah. They had money with them. The silver coin, that was the currency at the time they were living. So they had some money, and they will send that 2 of you go, so we can arrange and bring some food for the rest. فَلْيَنْظُرْ. But there was one advice given. Subhanallah. If we understand and learn the lessons from the Quran, what Allah is telling us. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَيُّهَا أَزْكَى طَعَامًا. What was the guidelines that was given? When you go, don't just pick up anything and eat it or bring it back. You must look for the most purest food. What does this mean? Azka ta'aman. Bring the most purest food, that come back with halal food. Do not just pick up anything that is haram. In the time that they were living, animals were slaughtered in the name of their idols. This was haram meat. So the guideline that was given, go out, search for halal food. This is an important lesson for us to learn. We go out shopping to buy, do not just pick up anything. You must see that if this is halal or is haram or is doubtful. Al-halalu bayyinun wal-haramu bayyinun wa baynahuma mushtabihat. Halal is clear, haram is clear. One brother went to a takeaway and asked that, is it halal or is it haram? So the worker was unsure. He said, I think maybe it's 90% halal. Maybe. And he was confused that either it's halal or either it's haram. That's clear. I think it's halal. Is that good enough for us? And some would say, it's fine. The person that's in the shop, it's his responsibility. He's a Muslim and the burden will be upon him. This is what the Masla says. Okay, that's fine. But if it's haram, it's going to affect our body. The body has been made for worship and ibadah. And if the wrong fuel goes in this body, then it will not function. A man-made thing like a car that needs petrol and diesel is put in, it will not function. This body that Allah has made is for ibadah and worship. So halal, we have to be very particular, very strict with halal and haram and teach our children. Go, what is halal? And then also the guideline teachings that was given to them is وَلْيَتَلَطَّفْ. This is the point which is the middle part of the Quran, half of the Quran. That be gentle and not let anyone know that of you, who you are. So there's so many lessons that we learn from this. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them, the power of Allah. We should rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, total reliance on Allah, tawakkul. And for the lessons for the youth, what is our life about? We have to make some change in our life. We have to have some plan of what we can do to achieve in our life. Life is not only about going to the gym and posting pictures, 11:59, I was in the gym, and sharing it with friends. And then 2 hours later sending pictures of chicken or beef steak. And then in the evening we have other plans. Those things which are halal, that is fine, that we can do. But we have to think bigger than this. Allah has created me. I am young. And the time when we are small is spent in just playing. And the time of old age is so many illnesses that come, diseases, and old age and the illnesses make a person become so weak. The only time we can do something in our life where Allah has given us the strength and the power and the ability to do something is when we are young. So we have some career. What can we do for deen? What can we do to spread deen? What can we do for people in general? And then our Muslims, how can we benefit them? Learn Quran, understand Quran, spread Quran. If we do not have that means, we cannot do that. If Allah has given us wealth, use this to build hospitals, masjids, water pumps, any project of charity. And if you cannot do this, in our children and offspring, that they can be practicing deen and do something for deen. We have something, legacy that we leave behind. In Surah Yasin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ. Either we leave a legacy of haram behind us by opening shisha bars and opening movie theaters and doing haram things, or either we do things which will benefit us in the grave that will continue. The reward will continue. So we have to think, those things which are halal, they can be done. But is this what life is only about? Is there nothing else just to have a nice car and a nice looking after your body, lifting weights and eating healthy? These are important things of our life, of course. But is this the only thing that we focus on and forget everything else? Our real purpose of life? So we have a mission. We have a legacy that we want to leave behind. What can we do for deen? How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can use me of a means of guidance, and how I can invest for my akhirah. So once I leave from this world, the reward will continue. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand and to spread unto others. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.